Hey guys, so I decided to start a garden. Why did I start one? I don't really know. I just got bored. Alright, first thing first, I gotta set up this fence because I got dogs in the backyard. As you can see, it was a good idea to get this fence because this little Tyrannosaurus Rex decided to try and kill my garden already. Alright guys, this is the layout of how I wanted my crops to be in my garden. So for the light tan, I'm gonna plant potatoes. The light green, I'm gonna plant green onions. For the blue, I'm gonna plant candy onions. For the orange, I'm gonna be planting carrots. For the pink, I'm gonna be planting strawberries. And for the yellow, I'm gonna be planting corn. Ignore the faded out tan spots. I realized that's too many potatoes I should be planting, so I decided I wanted to plant strawberries there instead. Alright guys, I decided the next step was to start getting rid of the grass and the weeds that was inside my fence area. After the first 3 days of work of trying to get rid of all these weeds and grass while planting beds, I saw a method called the no-till method. Basically, you're supposed to put cardboard over the grass and the weeds and it will smother them and kill the weeds underneath, and then you put compost on top of the cardboard. You directly just plant the seeds into the compost that's on top of the cardboard, and later on the seeds will begin to breach through the cardboard as it starts growing roots. So anyway, I did not do that. Well, I didn't do that for 6 out of 8 of the beds. Anyway, here's me pulling out like a little fern or something. I don't know what this is. Yeah, baby. Just listen to that crunch. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys can tell, but it took a long time to get this plot up and running. There was so much grass and so much weed that was so deeply rooted into the ground. So if you guys want to get a sense of scale of how long it took for me to pull out all the weeds in the grass, I sped this process up by 1,500%. So if you guys want a little bit of ASMR, this is what it sounds like without muting the clips. Doesn't this just scratch your brain? Alright guys, after getting the land so bare, I decided it was time to start setting up the beds. For the first day, I was only able to get the green onions and the candy onions as it started to turn nighttime and I was getting bit up by mosquitoes. Anyway, for setting up these beds, I decided it was best to mix up the compost with the soil. This is because my soil is pretty sandy, so I needed some compost to keep the moisture inside of it. I've also heard that seeds like it when the soil's not too compacted, as it could be hard for them to breach the surface. So I went around with a shovel and loosened all the dirt about 6 to a foot deep. As you guys can tell, I still had a couple of weeds and grass inside of my area, so I started pulling them out by hand, making sure to get the roots. This would cut down heavily on the maintenance time needed after planting the seeds. Alright guys, after pulling out all the weeds, this is how the bare soil looked. As you can see, it's quite moist and it'll crumble after touching it, but it's only like this because it rained the other day. You may not be able to tell, but my soil is quite sandy. So now it was time to start mixing the compost with the soil. Initially, I tried raking the compost into the soil, then I realized it wasn't really doing anything, so I started using my hand. And then, I thought I had a eureka moment. I tried using the shovel. And then after a couple minutes, I realized the shovel was pretty useless, so I started using my hands again. Thanks to me loosening up the soil before this, it was easy to mix the compost pretty deeply into the soil. And if you guys couldn't already tell, yes, my hands were indeed incredibly dirty. Alright guys, it was finally time to start planting the green onions. So for the green onions, I was supposed to be creating 12 rows, but I'll let you see for yourself what I did. As you guys can see, I'm looking inside the seed packet wondering who stole my seeds. It was only then I realized I accidentally poured all the seeds into the first row. Little whoops on my end. So I think my only option now is to just wait for them to sprout and then move them then. So until then, they're just stuck hugging each other. Alright guys, it was now time to start setting up the bed for the candy onions. I was gonna do the same process of loosening up the soil, putting the compost, mixing the compost in, and then planting the seeds. Right here I did beat on the ground because I wanted to make a pathway like it was in Minecraft. After flattening out the pathway area between the two beds, I continued working on the candy onions. Again, because I was like kind of raking the soil trying to get the weeds out, the soil kind of covered most of the other weeds and the grass, so I had to pull it out while digging up the bed at the same time. Finally, I started adding the compost for the candy onions bed. I started mixing it up just like I did the other green onions. I then started planting the candy onions 6 inches apart and ½ inch deep into the compost soil mix. After planting all the onion seeds, I decided to call it a day. I was getting eaten up by mosquitoes left and right, and I don't have sickle cell disease to fight against the malaria. It was now a bright and sunny second day, maybe even too sunny, some would say. I started wetting up the soil just to make it easier to pull out the weeds later on, and I started creating the bed for the carrots. After setting up the boundaries of the bed, I started loosening the soil with the shovel again. As you can see, as I loosened up the soil, there was a lot of green still left underneath the beds. So guys, can you guess what I did after loosening up the soil? That's right, I went by hand and I started taking out all the weeds and grass one by one. Anyway, I skipped ahead a little bit and I'm starting to put down the compost for the carrots. I started mixing the compost into the soil once again because carrots and onions love to be moist. After thoroughly mixing up the soil and the compost, I started making rows for the carrots. And unlike last time with the green onions, I didn't use all the seeds on one row. I grabbed about 8 seeds per time and started sprinkling them throughout the row. As you can tell, I really didn't want to repeat with the green onion seeds. Alright guys, so with carrots, they're supposed to be grown 1 inch apart. So basically, when they start sprouting, I need to thin out the carrot. I'll just need to grab the weakest looking ones and throw them away. After the carrots, it's finally time to start the corn. I did the same thing I did with the other beds and loosened up the soil. And obviously I pulled out all the weeds I could see after loosening up the soil. Right here guys, I did get a little boo-boo on my hand. As you can see, I ripped my callus. So like a reasonable person, I put on gloves to protect my hands while pulling out weeds. Now I can already guess what you guys are thinking. Oh, you got soft hands, brother. Well, guess what? I don't care. While I was weeding, I noticed that there was a lot of dead weeds that browned once I tilled them the other day. So I guess this is how the no-till method would work, as it would stop the weeds from getting sunlight. Unfortunately, the sun started getting too hot and my phone overheated, stopping the recording here. As you can see in this clip, I do have the corn bed done. All I did was just put compost over it, I didn't mix it in. Later on, I'll show a video of how it already sprouted in 3 days. For the corn, it was all planted 1 feet apart. In each hole, there was 3 seeds to make sure they would sprout. Corns need to grow in a grid pattern so they can pollinate each other. I also saw in my garden that I had ants in there, but I read online that ants can be beneficial and eat pests inside the garden, so I'll just leave them for now until they actually become a problem. As you guys can see, the soil is still moist as it rained again last night. I also got this bundle of green onions I've been using while cooking. I already cut these 3 times, so I think it was time to start just using them for seed. Unlike potatoes, onions are actually grown from seeds, so after a year of it being planted, it should start growing flowers and creating seeds for me to plant. So I read for when planting onions that are already grown, you want to have the bulb showing pretty much at the top of the soil. You guys may have seen videos of people splitting the bulbs in half, but that wouldn't actually make the green onion grow. So yeah, it was time to start creating the beds for the potatoes, and as you can guess, I did the exact same thing I did for the carrots, the green onions, and the candy onions. I started loosening the soil, and then I mixed the compost into the soil. I made sure to mix it pretty deeply this time because potatoes are supposed to be planted about 4 to 6 inches deep into the soil. Making sure the soil is loose is really good for potatoes because it helps the roots spread and makes more room for the tubers to grow big and healthy. It may be a bit of work, but I think it will be worth it later when it's time to harvest the potatoes. Now originally I did want to plant Yukon Gold potatoes, but at my Walmart they had none, so I just had to bottom out and buy russet potatoes instead. So for this next potato bed, I decided not to mix compost into the soil. I just wanted to compare my natural soil to the composted bed I created for the other potatoes. Sorry for the little peripheral on the left. I had you guys hanging on the chair and it just so happened to clip the chair into the video. I did buy a camera stand later on, but that won't really be used this video, only at the end. Anyway, the main difference between a composted bed and a non-composted bed is that the composted bed has a lot more nutrients compared to the non-composted bed. Basically, it has nitrogen from cow manure and whatever carbon they added like woods or leaves to it. Another thing that's good about compost is that it holds water better, but it also drains better, so it prevents root rot from happening to my plants, which potatoes, carrots, onions are really prone to. And this is comparing to my sandy soil. When it hits high noon in my area, it does get a bit sunny. So for my natural soil, it does dry out pretty quickly, which is important because I'm starting the seeds directly into the bed instead of making them sprouts in my own house and then planting them after. And for seeds, this is very important. For them to germinate, they need to be in constant moist soil, but not soggy or dry soil. So dry soil might be difficult because it's always sunny here. Right around here, I got jump scared.
Oh my goodness. Guys, there's a cockroach. Look. Cockroach. It's not a house cockroach though. House cockroaches are bad. These ones aren't so bad.
So what you saw was a ground burrowed cockroach that is actually good for the soil. After realizing that, I just took him and threw him back into the garden. Also guys, I got a little sidetrack and decided to start building a composter I bought on Amazon for about $20. Anyway, the reason why composters have holes in them is so airflow can happen. The airflow is needed for the microbes to break down the organic material I put in here. It's also useful because it needs to drain out the moisture somehow so it's not soggy. I sped this up a lot because I had trouble setting it up. The corners kept folding over, so it was hard to clip them into place, but eventually I got it together. After I was finished being sidetracked, it was time to set up the area to prepare for the no-till garden method. First, I had to throw out the pile of weeds that I created while I was clearing out the garden. Later, I did put the corpses of my victims into the composter, obviously meaning the weeds being the victims. Okay, all jokes aside, I did put some potato skins, some onions, and some tomatoes into the composter already. Later, I will need to add some soil. I heard to get the perfect compost, you need to get a division of 3. You need to get 1/3 carbon, 1/3 nitrogen, and then 1/3 of soil. After mixing up all 1/3, it should create perfect compost usable for the garden. After finally getting the soil flat, it was time to add the cardboard to lay over the weeds and the grass. This is the key to doing the no-till method. You need this so it can block out the sunlight and kill the grass and weeds. The cardboard will later be breached by the plant from the roots, and it also helps retain moisture. After finally laying out flat the cardboard on top of the soil and making sure there was no gaps, it was time to add the compost. I did think it wasn't enough compost, so I did get another bag later on, but that'll be for another day for when I plant the strawberries. For strawberries, they only produce 1 to 2 berries per, but they will create runners that will spread throughout the garden. Anyway, so it became another day and it was raining, but I wanted to get these potatoes in the ground anyway. I was gonna plant russet potatoes I got from Walmart, and since I already prepared the soil from another day, all I had to do was just plant the potatoes into them. Each potato needed to be planted a foot apart and then about 4 to 6 inches deep. The spacing is important so they don't disturb each other. Later, when they grow enough, I will be doing the hilling method so they do not overripe. After I finished planting the potatoes in the bed that I composted, it was time to plant the potatoes into the non-composted bed. Because I ran out of compost bags, I decided to just do this bare. I also wanted to experiment a little. I planted each of the potatoes the same way I did for the composted bed, just to make sure the experiment goes correctly. If you guys look closely, I do have a lot of soil in my hair. Just ignore that. I will take a bath after I'm finished. Potatoes are mostly praised to be the most hardy crop to really grow. I even saw a potato chip growing sprouts from it. After I finished planting the potatoes, I went around and collected all the weeds that I found lying around in the beds. After I finished weeding, I found a pot in my backyard. This pot looked like it already had some potting mix in it, and it also had dry roots, so I think it would be good to contain moisture inside. I then planted a potato in here to see how it would grow compared to the other 2 beds I had prepared. And here I am digging with my hands again, not having learned my lesson after tearing a callus. Just because I had extra potatoes, I decided to plant the extras right next to the pot to see how that would grow. Alright guys, we're finally reaching the ending of the first video. What you see right now is 3 days after I planted the corn. For my first time planting corn, this seemed incredibly fast. Anyway, I'm going to show you the rest of the garden right now. As you can see, only the corn really sprouted. Everything else is still dormant. For the carrots and onions that I got, it will take about 1 to 2 weeks for them to start sprouting out of the soil. As for the potatoes, it takes about 2 to 4 weeks to start sprouting. And for the strawberries, I'm going to be buying the bare root ones, so they're going to be already partially grown. Next, I'm showing the potted and dug into the ground potatoes. Obviously, nothing has grown yet, just like the other potatoes. And lastly, I'm going to show you guys the composter that I set up. As you guys can see, I put all the weeds and then the cardboard from the boxes. All the stickers that you see on there are biodegradable. They're sent from Amazon. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and get ready for more farming content. Bye!